the candidates. So in this instance, transmission infrastructure will be procured by private sector participants, what we call independent transmission providers. So in the configuration of how this works is that the ministry is the one that is mandated to procure. So we go out and procure, and then the NTCSA, it is the party that buys, if you like, when we procure this transmission, and it is the NTCSA that buys what would have procured. And this we are going to ensure that we procure it in accordance with the most cost-effective and also tendering procedures that are fair, competitive, and also equitable. Those values that are enshrined in the Constitution or the principles with regards to public procurement are going to find expression in this work that we will be doing as a ministry. So like I said, the criteria for the ITP pilot is that it has to be consistent with the transmission development plan. So how we chose these corridors in the Northern Cape, the Northwest, and Gauteng is consistent with what Mr. Skeepers at NTCSA would have mapped going forward. And it must also support the IRP. Of course, we are working on the back of the IRP 23. We are in the process of revising that IRP. The latest version iteration is at NETLEC. Once NETLEC is done with its consideration, we're going to take that to cabinet for pronouncing. But we have a sense of the direction that we are taking, and also on the back of the IRP 23, we are able to unleash the body of work that we are doing. And then it must be commercially viable. So what we have done was to canvass a market opinion on how should be the configuration, the permutation of this procurement. We have received a significant amount of feedback from the market. So we've designed it in a manner that is going to succeed. The last thing you want is to put together a program, and that program is not successful because the market does not have appetite to participate in that, because they don't think that is designed in a manner that is going to facilitate their participation. And then we also are driven by a principle of what we call late-stage tender. By late-stage tender, we mean the issues with regards to regulations and permitting and licensing ought to be in place. So the right of way, the issues around servitude should be in place, the EIA should be in place, so that you don't burden the private sector with the responsibility of securing those permitting and licensing, because it's time consuming, but it's also money. But once we have a late tender stage, we know that there's a degree of certainty. Government would have done its own homework, and we are placing this before the market. So the candidate of these projects is in these corridors that I've mentioned. The EIA will be in place, and also the right of way will be in place to allow us the opportunity to ensure that the program is successful. And then we are going to, as a result of this, we're going to get new renewable energy capacity in these corridors. Like I said, I mean, the corridors were designed deliberately. We know what are the, if you like, the stranded electrons, the electrons that can be evacuated as a result of the constraints on the transmission lines. And then we have targeted those ones where we can be able to unleash in the shortest possible space of time our ability to ensure that we are able to achieve the kind of results that we desire. Like I said, the total package of the lines, 1,164 kilometers. The total package of transformers is about 2,630 MVA of transformers. And then the new generation capacity that we are going to unlock as a result of this intervention is 3,222 megawatts. So if you come to think of it, it's about 80% of what, or 70%, I'm sorry, of what is Medupi and Kusile. So we're moving in the right direction. Just by unlocking this, we're able to ensure that we're unleashing about 3,022 megawatts of new generation capacity. Like I said, sorry, about 63% of the total capacity of Medupi and Kusile as individual. So what are these lines in the Northern Cape? We're going to what we call the Aris Genesis line is going to be about 200 kilometers, and then the expectation is that the completion date of this around August of 2029. And then we also list what are these corridors by name, so that there's an appreciation that indeed we've been very deliberate. Like I said, we're doing 7 corridors, or if you like a corridor. Some of these corridors are then separated into various packaged into various projects. And in total, we are talking about 7 projects that we are putting out to the private sector. Like I said, 1,160 kilometers of new lines to ensure that we are able to achieve the kind of ambition that we desire. When we went to the market, we asked the question, how best must we configure the call for proposal? And they were making the point, the majority of them is that do the build, operate, transfer, or build, operate, own, and transfer. That's the most popular outcome of this exercise, and that's how we're going to do it. When we go out into the market, build, operate, transfer, or build, operate, own, and transfer, that is going to be the basis of how we're going to go out into the market. So in summary, what is the timeline? So like I said, we have done the request for information starting November. We closed in February of this year, and that's how we got a sense of what is the market appetite. And then now we're going to do a request for qualification. And then we'll go out in July for request for qualification for those that think they've got the right credentials to participate. And there are many across the length and breadth of the globe who have expressed an intention to participate. They will participate. And then by end of the year, we'll have done the request for proposal in November, and then we'll then get to go into evaluation, and then we get to contract, and then we turn South Africa into a major construction site. So what's the significant point we're making is that for the South African economy to grow, we need to unshackle the issues of the structural constraint, which is really electricity and the inefficiencies on the logistics side. The second thing is greater investment by private sector. And that's why we're saying that if you look at the NDP, 20% of GDP must in total investment should be coming from private sector. Or private sector should account for, their investment should account to about 20% of the country's GDP. What the president announced and what Minister Godongwana announced, the 1 trillion rands over the MTF, is government's contribution to the infrastructure story. But we need significantly more than that for us to be able to achieve this. Electricity really gives us a pristine opportunity to transform the economy, to grow the economy. The next set of conversation that we'll be having with industry is the readiness of industry to participate. So it's one thing to raise the money, but it's quite another for industry to be ready to participate. What we know is that industry has hemorrhaged skills over a period of time as a result of contraction of the build program in the country. The capacity is not present, the engineers have left, the expertise have left to other parts of the world. So we need to work with industry to build that capacity. And then the second issue that requires conversation is for us to domesticate, if you like, the inputs into this, the building of the wires, the building of the transformers, the building of all the equipment that is associated with this program. Otherwise, we'll be exporting job opportunities. We want to expand the flow of industrial capacity in the country, and that's why we need to have conversation with the industry. But for that to happen, there has to be certainty of the pipeline and see-through of the pipeline. The pipeline must be funded as we work parallel to that in expanding the capacity of the South African industry to respond to this new demand in relation to transmission infrastructure. Thanks,
Minister, thank you very much for all of those insights. Colleagues, without any waste of time, we'll go straight into the questions and answers. We'll start with questions in the room, and Lebohang will take us through questions that have been shared online. So by a show of hands, and as per our established sort of protocol, you'll introduce yourself and the media house you represent. Antoinette. Any other hands? Okay, we'll go to Eyewitness News and Katlego in that order.
Good morning, Minister. Antoinette Slowett. I'm a freelance journalist. I want to ask you about the development premium. When the REAP program started, the first 3 rounds were extremely expensive because there was a development premium, a new market, and the bidders had to assume risk. Do you expect there to be a similar development premium in this program? And if so, will it again be passed on to the consumer? And what do you think the impact of this will be on the tariff? Will it be a pass-through? Because at the moment, the renewables are becoming a bigger and bigger portion of the tariff, and there's nothing, it's just presented as a fait accompli. It's already negotiated, and consumers and even Eskom has no opportunity to question that. Thank you.
Thanks. I'll sort of answer it after my question.
Okay, thanks, Katlego.
Yeah, I also wanted to, good morning, Katlego Logodi here from the SABC. I wanted to also find out about the implications on tariffs in terms of how things expected to move when this plan gets into motion. And have you identified any risks to you rolling out this major project? There have been concerns over time around some projects that have delayed, point in case the city of Johannesburg will be sitting with a whole lot of projects that have not been completed in time. Have you identified certain risks? How are we actually going to ensure that we don't see this project prolonged and more money spent when it could have been avoided? Thank you.
Thank you. Lebohang, do we have any questions online?
Yes, we do have questions. We have a question from Chris Levin from EE Business Intelligence. The first question, what is the likely commissioning date under the specific initial determination for 1,164 kilometers of 400 kV line? And the second question, this 1,164 kilometers is less than 1 metric type transmission line. There are 14,000 over 10 metric types on which are 1,400 kilometers per year. What about the remaining 13,000? Third question, is this transmission initial determination and procurement coordinated with delivery with REIT?
Thank you. Are those all the questions?
We have another one from Terence Lima from Engineering. The first question, what concession term has government settled on for ITP, and in what condition must these lines be transferred? The second question, when will the actual pilot RFP be launched? It's actually 3 more questions.
I beg your pardon?
There's 3 more questions.
Yeah, you can deal with them. You can relay the questions.
Okay. The third question, what other regulations are still required before the RPF can be launched? The fourth question, what is the anticipated investment rate across the 7 corridors? The fifth question, is there any concern about the IPPO managing RFP given high-level executive changes at the office? And the sixth question, where can the 7 routes be found?
Okay, thanks. Where can the second someone? Okay, we'll take responses, and then we'll have a last round of questions after the minister has responded. Thanks.
Good morning, everyone. So the first question, Antoinette, based on the development premium, the new market, etc. So in that instance, we've studied a number of global models. As you may know, in Brazil, there are over 400 independent transmission projects that they've conducted over 40 auctions over the years. In India, there are also a few hundred independent transmission projects, Chile, Peru, etc. So we've studied the models that they have implemented. One of the global average that we've seen from a cost perspective is that we see cost reductions of about 35 to 40% in ITP projects, which is very encouraging. The model that we are most likely going to be implementing is a reverse bidding auction system, which means that the lowest bidder will actually win the tender. That is made up of the upfront capex. So there's in that regard, it's made up of the upfront capex that comes into play. What is the capex to roll out the transmission infrastructure? Then it makes allowance for an operations and maintenance amount over the concession period. And then it also allows for reasonable returns from a debt and equity perspective. So that is the model that we're most likely considering at the moment for implementation. And in that regard, we think we're going to get the best value for money. Then in terms of the pass-through costs for ITPs, at this stage for the ITP pilot, it will really be in terms of the regulatory clearing account in terms of overs and unders. And in that regard, it will be a pass-through cost. We've also established a multidisciplinary task team between NERSA and government, because this is a country first, not just for us, but also a country first for NERSA. And we have extensively studied how other regulators across the world deal with this. So, of course, this is subject to the regulator's decision in terms of how they deal with this. But for the pilot, we definitely have a clear way forward. But what also needs to be clear is the medium to long-term program. Then the question on the likely commissioning, the likely date for the determination. So firstly, we've got the request for qualification, as the Minister mentioned, that would be issued at the end of July. We'll then look at a request for proposals at the end of November. And then just to make the point that the 1,164 kilometers is for the pilot itself. There's still work that we are doing in terms of rolling this out on a medium to long-term basis. So this is really, for the first tender. So, and this is, complementing the work that the NTCSA is doing. So it's over and above the work that the NTCSA already does. The regulations, the Minister will speak to the regulations, but the regulations are underway, and they really create an enabling framework for private sector participation in the same way that we had with the new generation regulations. They're really important. We always make the point from a certainty, transparency, and predictability perspective. That's where the regulations really come in to protect both government and the private sector. Thank you very much, Minister. I'll stop there.
Thank you very much for those questions. Perhaps on the regulations, is that those regulations will be issued on Thursday. So this coming Thursday, we are issuing the regulations, and I think that will further clarify how we want to go about in relation to this procurement of this transmission. And then to Katlao's question on the risks. So I made the point earlier on that to eliminate the risk, we're doing what we call a late stage tender. By that, what do I mean? One of the biggest risks that will confront this problem and continue to haunt the work of Mr. Skeepers and the speed with which he's able to build the lines is the issues of right of way. So you are going to be crisscrossing people's private properties. In remote areas, we're going to go through people's farms. And in some instances, for you to get the right of way, it can be a major contestation. We'll exhaust what is in the law, and then ultimately, if we don't agree, we are going to do expropriation. It's nothing new. So we're going to do expropriation, and then we compensate you at the level that we would have determined. Just to give you a sense, there are projects that have been delayed for a period of over 3 years as a result of the right of way. You find that it stretches over 300 kilometers. They designed to make it optimal. It suggests that it must go through a particular private-owned farm. In this particular example, it's just 12 kilometers of 300 kilometers, but it's stopping everything. And the team has made all types of offers, engagement, and that gets to be delayed. Then the next step is to show that time would have exhausted all that is required in law or obligation. Then we resort to expropriation. So the ones that we are putting up are the ones that we don't think that there are issues in relation to the right of way. And then the other risk is in the delays for approvals of the EIA and the likes. Government can be lackluster, the inefficiencies in the state. they can undermine the speed with which we are able to build. And when we say late stage tender, we identify those corridors where we've got right of ways, the EIAs are in place. All that is required is for us to conclude the procurement process and ensure that those successful bidders, developers are on the, have taken a construction or rather site, and they are beginning to construct. And in relation to the issues that are related to the IPP office, so we finalizing with the DBSA, setting up the ITPO office, but the procurer really are going to use an existing infrastructure, that is the IPP. We do accept that the technical engineering requirements for generation and for transmission are completely different. But for purposes of this first pilot, we are going to use the existing infrastructure. It's tried and tested. And of course, I mean, I think the point that was made is a apparent turnover of executives. Now the head of the IPP office has concluded his term. We are recruiting someone who will act. I'm confident that in the next 3 months we'll have appointed the new head. And now what the benefit we have is that we have a much more better appreciation of what are the technical requirements for the new heads, because part of the first phase of this procurement is going to be taking place at the IPP office. Yes, we have identified the lines. I mean, we'll share them with you, those corridors. I will not burden you. Like I said, we are very specific. What is the length of the line? What is the total capacity of the transformers, the length, and then also when are we expecting the completion date? So we've listed all of those. I mean, I will not go through all 7 of them. We will share them with you. I mean, it's a public document now. You'll have an appreciation of where these lines are and what is the capacity that will be unlocked. I did make the point that in total we'll have a total generation capacity of about 3,200 200 megawatts plus as a result of this intervention. Thanks, Steve. Oh, and then the point that was raised was that we need 14,000 kilometers, but we are coming out to the market on 1,060, that number that I've mentioned. No. Remember that these are projects that are candidates for the ITPO. So the investment by private sector. Mr. Skeepers will still, from the NTCSA's balance sheet, roll out that the transmission on their side. So this is not exhaustive of what we'll be doing over this period, but it's in addition to what Mr. Skeepers will be doing. For an example, there's an allocation from ESCOM for Mr. Skeepers, the NTCA, or from the NTCSA rather, to do this expansion on balance sheet. He's continuing with that work. But what we are doing with the first phase of the ITPO is to identify these corridors for off-balance sheet financing, like I've indicated. We are leaning more towards build, operate, transfer, build, operate, own, transfer. That's what the market have said. And I'm sure that in the request for proposal will be a bit more explicit in what the expectations are. So what I'm announcing now is not the total package of the rollout. You are absolutely correct that if the ambition is to do 14,000 kilometers in 10 years, surely your ambition can be something about 1,164, should be significantly more than that. We accept that, and Mr. Skeepers, we add on what he's doing. And then, as you can imagine, this is the first phase. So as we scale up, we have lessons on how to introduce efficiencies. I'm sure you'll see that is likely going to peak going into the future. What that peak is, we'll come back and announce to the market. But what we know is that in terms of the TDP, our Transmission Development Plan, we should be peaking at about 2,300 kilometers of new lines per annum. That's where the peak is. Why aren't we able to reach that peak now is the issues I raised earlier on. Industry readiness and the kind of skills that we have hemorrhaged over a period of time. Because we are not building in this country, the skills did not remain here. The skills went. I mean, the skills are mobile, especially these high-end, sought-after technical skills. They've left. They've gone to other parts of the world. So we need to build up a credible program that gives certainty, that the program will be continuous, will not be interrupted. And in that way, those skills are able to come back home and we are able to broaden the flow of what is possible. And again is the issue of industry. You have not built, so that industry capacity does not exist as I speak to you now. So if we were to go out tomorrow, procure, get the money, you are likely going to import some of those key components. It's going to take us a bit of time to build that capacity, but we are engaging with an industry to build the capacity over a period of time. Otherwise, you are going to suffer the same consequence that we have suffered on the generation side. We spend well over 264 billion rands or so, about new 8,000 plus megawatts of new generation capacity, but we have not built an industry. We are importing everything, and I'm not suggesting that it is our intention that we are going to build everything local, because it's other instances where we will not be able to beat what comes from other jurisdictions across the world, in particular China. So we are going to choose our battles correctly to say where are the areas where we think we have a niche, where we think we can build an industry over a period of time, and then coordinate that with the instruments that sit with the DTIC to ensure that we are able to broaden the flow of industrialization and not hamper or introduce a new premium for private sector participants by creating a premium of securing or procuring inefficiently when in fact they can get it cheaper somewhere. So you can see that it's a delicate balancing act, and that's why the pilot is going to give us significant insights, and over a period of time we should be able to ramp up. Thanks.
So colleagues, with all these responses, we are drawing our media briefing to an end, and perhaps let me reiterate some of the sort of key lineup items. As Minister indicated, on Thursday, they'll be gazetting the transmission regulations, and then on Friday, there'll be the South Africa Transmission Infrastructure Investment Forum at the JSC in Sandton, where the key findings of the market sounding exercise will be presented to the market. And the Minister will further highlight the new transmission, or unpack rather, the new transmission regulations that will govern private sector participation. And yeah, the summit or the forum intends to do a bit more. It's outlined in the media advisory that we've shared with you, as you are invited to a doorstop opportunity after the session. Thanks, colleagues. We are concluding.